Hey everyone, this is Alex and this is a GoPro Hero 10 beginner's guide. I'm going to be talking about the parts that come with the GoPro, the specs and info, and then I'm going to give you a full tour of the user interface, features, and how to use it. I'll also give you a lot of information like the things you should be aware of and lighting conditions. I have all the timestamps or chapters in the description so you can skip around and learn about the things you're most curious about. So with that being said, let's get right into it. So the camera can shoot from 1080p, which is HD, all the way to 5.3K. The camera can shoot at 240 frames per second as long as you're using 2.7K or HD. 4K can shoot up to 120 FPS, and 5K can shoot up to 60 FPS. The Hero 10 is waterproof, but make sure you don't do any deep diving or anything of that sort because it's only waterproof down to 33 feet or 10 meters. The GoPro also has voice control, which means that you can say things like GoPro, take a video, and it'll take a video for you. We'll set that up later in the video. We can shoot slow motion up to 8 times, and we have Time Warp 3.0, which is like an advanced version of time lapse. You can live stream but only in HD. You can take super photos, HDR photos, and RAW photos. If you pay for the GoPro subscription, you can set your GoPro to automatically upload to the cloud. Lastly, the GoPro has Hypersmooth 4.0, which is video stabilization. So now it's time to open the case. So let me just open this. So I'm just going to set this off to the side for now. And now we have a case that used to serve as a shipping box, but now you can store your GoPro in here along with some of your gear. So let's open this. So I ordered this from Amazon and the link is in the description if you want to order this exact bundle. So here we have the camera itself, GoPro Hero 10. We also have a mount, a curved sticky mount, a thumb screw, a USB-C cable for charging or viewing files, and a battery. I also ordered this to come with a 128GB micro SD card and also an adapter so I can insert it into a laptop or PC. Now let's dive deeper into each part. First we have the battery. So note that the Hero 9 uses this exact same battery, so if you have a Hero 9, you can interchange these. So this right here is a curved sticky mount for putting on curved surfaces like a helmet for mountain biking or snowboarding, and it's also really durable, and it sticks on very well. So here is the mount that actually goes on the sticky mount, so you just pull up the stopper like this, and then slide it right into place and wait for it to snap. And then push down the stopper again. Now you have a thumb screw, which is for actually securing the GoPro to it, but before I show you how to do that, we're actually going to get into the camera. So note that I took off all of the GoPro's packaging ahead of time, so make sure you take off the 2 plastic screen protectors and the lens protector. And this is our door, so you just pull the lever down first, and then just swing it open. So now we have the holes for our battery, micro SD card, and USB-C cable for charging. So push in the battery first, make sure it's lined correctly, and then put in the micro SD card and make sure that the electrical contacts of the card is facing away from the middle of the GoPro, and then just push it in like that. Then you can close the door. Make sure you don't try to open this because this isn't the door. This is actually a microphone and it's also a drainage for when you put it underwater, so the water will drain out from this. So that's a microphone. There's also one on the front right here, and there's also one on the top here for spatial audio and figuring out which microphone is the best for the situation. So this is the shutter button that takes videos, photos, and time lapses. This is the power button. It's also the mode button that lets you change between photo, video, and time lapse modes. So now if you want to put the GoPro on a mount, undo the finger mounts at the bottom just by pulling them. Also, when you put it on the mount, make sure that it's facing this way and not this way, because if it's facing this way, when you put in the screw, it'll block the door. So that's why you want to make sure to put it in this way so that the screw is facing in the other direction. I think it's a good time to mention that I already went through the initial setup of the GoPro Hero 10. It's pretty easy to do, so I don't even think I would have put it in this video anyway. And also, I will not be going over the GoPro Quik app in this video, and I'll probably do a different video on that. To turn the GoPro on, just press the on button once. Up here shows the recording time. Let me just put this lens cap behind it so you can see it better. Okay, so yeah, this shows the recording time, which is 5 hours. This will change depending on the size of your micro SD card and the video size, resolution, and FPS that you're shooting in. And of course, this is the battery at 95%. Also, if your screen ever turns off, just tap it once. No matter what you're doing right now, recording or not recording, it's still doing what it's supposed to be doing. Just tap it, it's trying to save battery power. Also, if the buttons go away like that just happened, just tap it and it'll go back. Up here, it shows the mode we're currently in, and when you turn on your GoPro, it automatically goes to video mode. You can change the mode by swiping like this, or pressing the mode button, which is also the power button. All these small circular buttons are called shortcuts, and you can actually customize what they all do. So for example, if I wanted to change what this slow motion one does, I could hold down on it and now I can choose any video setting to be that shortcut. I'll get into what all these video settings do later in the video. So I could change this to bitrate if I wanted to, and by the way, if we're ever in a menu like this, you can click in an empty space to exit, or press the mode button and it'll exit for you. But anyway, I'm just going to change this back to slow motion. Before I tell you about all the video settings and stuff, I'd like to tell you what most of these default shortcuts do, just so you start out with a better understanding of the GoPro Hero 10 interface. This one is hypersmooth stabilization, so if you notice when I stop turning the camera, it stabilizes it by virtually smoothing out the turn. So it's just stabilizing our video by smoothing everything out. Keep in mind that the higher the stabilization, the more battery can be drained. So if we turn this off, we get no stabilization. High has a bit more stabilization, and Boost uses the max amount of stabilization, but again, it uses more battery. And I personally use standard most of the time. This is the zoom. I never use this feature because it's just digital cropping, and it's not even like you can change the zoom during the video, and I like to change the zoom with a video editor after I record. And also, this right here is the lens, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So now let's talk about the video settings. So this tells us the resolution, FPS, and lens we're using. So right now I'm shooting in 4K, 30 FPS, and I'm using the linear lens, and we'll talk about the lenses in a bit. So if we click on this, we can see all of the presets, which are just presets of different combinations of settings we can use. So GoPro gives us a few by default, like standard, activity, and cinematic. You can create your own, obviously, because you can see I have more than that. To create your own, just go to this, which allows you to reorder your profiles, so it'll make it so that you can hold down on these and reorder them. But that's not the purpose of this right now. Right now, we're going to click the plus, create a new profile, and now you can set your own settings for your new profile in here, and when you're done, hit the check, and then you should be good and a new profile will be added. But before you try to create your own profile, continue watching to see what each of the settings does. So first, let's edit one of them. So to edit one, press the pencil icon here. Or when you're out over here, you can hold down on this button and then you'll also get into the settings. So first let's talk about the resolution and FPS. So the first line has 4:3 aspect ratios, but I never use those because I never end up needing that extra vertical space in post-processing. But if you want, you can click one at the top to get that ratio. The second line has 16:9 aspect ratios. So this is basically like the standard for YouTube videos, and it's just a common aspect ratio that I use most of the time. So just remember that the first row is 4:3 and the second one 16:9. So for 16:9, we've got 1080p, 2.7K, 4K, and 5.3K. So you can shoot in 240 frames per second with this, as long as you're using 1080p or 2.7K. 4K bumps it down to 120 FPS, and 5K lowers its max to 60. So just press 1 to change it. So we could just change this to 60 frames if we wanted, and then I could use 5.3K. But for now, I'm just going to use 4K 60 FPS, and then just click this blue thing to confirm. So now it's time to talk about the virtual lens. So first we have super view, then we have wide, and then we have linear, horizon leveling, and then narrow. So I'm going to show you what they all do and why I would use them. So the bottom left shortcut and standard preset is set to lens by default. So this L means we're using the linear lens. Super view is the widest lens, and you could use it when you're doing something like mountain biking or snowboarding. I don't suggest using it if you're filming a movie or a YouTube video. A quick note is that Super View has limitations as to what FPS you can use. For example, at least in the firmware version I'm using in this video, you cannot shoot 4K or 5K with 60 FPS unless you use something other than Super View. So just so you can see, this is the wide lens right here, and then this is linear right here. So linear doesn't have what GoPro calls a fisheye look, and it's what you would see from like a normal camera or a phone. So if you don't want your video to look a little bit popping out and distorted, use anything below wide. And by the way, this is all just digital cropping, so nothing is actually being changed inside the physical camera or lens. And that's why I never use a narrow view, because it's basically the linear lens but just cropped. And as I said, I like to edit my stuff in a video editor afterwards. Next up, we have the horizon leveling option, which is actually the linear lens, but it levels the horizon of the image. So what I mean by that is it keeps the horizon line of your video aligned properly. So if I tilt the GoPro Hero 10, you can see that it's acting like it's not tilting at all, and the horizon line is still staying at the same horizontal rotation. Eventually, after about 45 degrees, it eventually snaps and then gets loose until you bring it back to its normal position and it locks into place again. Now let's get into what you could use each of these lenses for. So I would use super view if I was snowboarding or mountain biking, so you could see pretty much everything. A lot of times I'd use wide if I'm not doing anything that extreme, like maybe I was filming an underwater video. I'd also use wide if I wanted to get a higher FPS value, since super view doesn't let you use certain FPS values, like I said before. I'd use linear if I was filming a video for YouTube, like maybe a music video for my other channel, or any video that shouldn't have a bit of a fisheye look. I would never use the narrow lens, but I definitely would use the horizon leveling, because if I wanted something to be stable but my camera was tilted in the moment, like if I was somewhere outside and I didn't have a tripod on me. Before I dive back into the settings menu, I'd like to talk about slow motion. So right now we are in one-time slow motion at 30 FPS. Essentially, the higher FPS, the more you can slow it down afterward, like in a video editor. So when you have a slow motion option enabled, it's not actually recording the slow motion like you would on your phone. It's just recording in a higher FPS so you can slow it down later. So what I mean is that your video would be very choppy if you tried to slow down a video that was originally 30 FPS. So you need those extra frames to smooth out your video. So in this example, I slow down a 30 FPS video and a 60 FPS video, and this 30 FPS is clearly more choppy, but when you slow it down even more, you can really notice how choppy it gets. So don't record in 30 FPS expecting you can slow it down 4 times, because it'll be very choppy. So basically, the more FPS, the more you can slow it down. So next up on our list, we have scheduled capture. You can turn this on if you want it to start a capture at a certain time in the morning or night or whatever. If you want to capture a sunset or a sunrise or anything like that, you can just choose a time on here and change it. But I'm just going to switch this to off because I don't need that. You'd only have duration on if you have scheduled capture on, unless you have just some weird other reason. Because the duration, you can tell it to schedule a capture, but only capture it for an hour while the sun rises, and then stop recording and turn off. So next we have HindSight, which I don't know why I had that on 15 seconds right now, but sometimes you may want to use it, because what it does is it starts your video with however many seconds you choose, 15 seconds or 3 seconds, of footage captured by your camera before you press the shutter button to record. So it's technically recording as you're moving your camera and stuff without actually pressing the record button. So here's an example of that. So I'm just going to show you how that works. So right now, 5 seconds, 6 seconds elapsed, and if we start to take a video, right? Hello, this is a video. It starts at 11 seconds because it was actually taking a video before that. So this would be useful if you were trying to take a video of something that you'd only see like once and you can't take it again. So next we've got our timer. So this is a timer that we can use to delay the shot. The zoom, I showed you that before, that just zooms in your camera, so just zooms it in. So now the Protune is where the more advanced settings are. So bitrate, so you should turn this on if you want good resolutions, but if you want to save space, you can turn this down. So now the shutter, so what this is it lets your GoPro automatically set how long the shutter stays open for your shot. So adjusting it could affect the stabilization in low light. So what this is if you see here, the higher it goes up, the darker it is, because if the shutter is open for a certain amount of time, it's not going to capture as much light. So now we got our EV comp. So this is stands for exposure value compensation, and it sets the brightness for your photos and videos. So if you want to see this here, you can see how bright it is, but just note that when you change the brightness, it adds a lot of grain to your videos. Only bump the setting up if you know you're somewhere dark like a cave and you want it to be brighter. Otherwise, just leave this alone. So now we got white balance. You can change how much of the balance there is, because right here, oops, we got auto here. So this automatically sets the white balance depending on what's there. And if you're going to do something that has a lot of grass in it, put it up to 5,500K, because it'll keep the green and it won't try to balance the green out. So if you're ever doing mountain biking or something that has to do with grass, just don't use auto. This is the minimum ISO, so I suggest keeping this at 100, but you can change this. So that if you make this lower, it reduces grain, but it makes your image darker if you put this down. I suggest keeping it at like 800 or the default, which is 1600 ISO. So the sharpness, pretty self-explanatory. It's how sharp the image is. You can have a medium sharpness, which is what I like by default. The color, so this is the color profile, so you can choose this to be vibrant, natural, or flat. So don't use flat if you're underwater because it looks terrible. Keep it on natural or vibrant if you're underwater, and it all just depends on the scene that you're in. So if you're in like a snowy place, use flat. It depends on where you are. Raw audio, so this increases your audio quality if you're using this camera's mic. It creates a raw audio track with full processing. And then the wind, this feature just basically blocks out the wind. The media mod, I'm not going to get into that because it's about media mod adding different accessories, but this is just about the GoPro Hero 10. So here, as I said, you can change the shortcuts. So this is where you can change them instead of just holding down on each of the icons. So the lower left shortcut, we can have lens, lower right zoom, upper left slow-mo, and then upper right hyper smooth. So those are all of our settings in the settings menu. So if you wanted to reset one of the default profiles, you could actually go here, go to the top, and click the icon in the top right, and then just click the yellow restore button, which will restore this. Or if you just wanted to reset the Protune, once you go into your profile and edit it, you can reset the Protune by pressing the restore button and then clicking reset. A tip for low storage, when you create a new profile, you can choose looping, which will delete the oldest footage when your card gets full for that profile. So here we can just click the check and choose our settings for looping mode, and then click the check when you're done. So let's get into time-lapse mode. So swipe on your camera to get to time-lapse, and if you click here, we can see the presets. So we've got time warp, time-lapse, and night-lapse. So first I'm going to show you the difference between time-lapse and time warp. So time warp, as I said in the beginning, is an advanced version of time-lapse. So time-lapse is just a bunch of images taken from the footage and strung together to make it seem faster, but time warp will actually stabilize the images, which will make it look really smooth. So what I mean by that is when the camera moves, it'll stabilize it. So in this example, I will move the camera and you'll see it smooths it out, even though I'm still doing things in this footage. So that's what time warp does. It stabilizes it as you're going. So this is just me setting up my computer setup. So now it's time to do time-lapse. And time warp compared to time-lapse is you'll see me turn the camera and it won't stabilize it at all. It'll look like one frame. So you'll see that right now. And then it happens now. If you see a really smooth time-lapse, it's probably time warp. Another thing I should say is that you should only use time warp if you're moving your camera around, and if your camera's stationary, you should just use time lapse because you don't need stabilization at all. Something I'd like to mention is that, at least in the firmware version I'm using in this video, time warp defaults to 1080p. I suggest bumping that up to 4K before you do any warps. So right here we can change our lens, we already went over that. Here we can change the speed. You can also let your GoPro automatically set the speed for your warp, but I advise against it because it's not very good at deciding how fast your video should be based off of all the movement in the video. And it also changes throughout the video, messing things up. You can change your speed manually from 2 times to 30 times. And on the side it gives you tips on how long your videos will be. For example, for 15 times it says 5 minutes of recording creates about 20 seconds of time warp video. Next up we have speed ramp, which allows you to change from time warp to normal speed or slow-mo while taking the video. So what I mean by that is, here I'll show you an example. So when I get down here, right, I can record, and while I'm recording there's a little button down here that allows me to switch from fast motion to normal speed and back. So now I'll click that, and now you see the time up here is going up by seconds because we're going at a normal speed. So now if I click stop here, now it'll go back to time warp. And now the seconds are going by slower, which means that we're in fast motion. So now I'm going to go back into our settings menu. So what we just did was a feature that was called speed ramp. And the speed ramp was normal speed when we were using it, but now we can change what the button does. If we drag it upward, now it'll go to slow motion if we click that button during our time lapse. So if you wanted a time lapse and then you quickly stop and now you're doing slow motion during it, you could do that, but I'm just going to turn this back to real speed. We talked about scheduled capture and duration before, as well as timer and zoom, and all these settings are the same as before. So that's it for our time warp basics, but now I'm going to go to time lapse because it has some slightly different settings that I just want to go over. One of the differing settings is the format option, so if you wanted to shoot a time-lapse photo, which essentially takes many different photos, so you can select some of your favorite moments in the time-lapse as a picture. Another differing setting is interval, which is basically the same thing as the speed option and time warp, but more specifically it sets how often your camera takes a photo. Because like I said before, time-lapse is just a bunch of images strung together to make it look fast. So right now I have this set to every 0.5 seconds it takes a photo for our video. So here you can make it every 60 minutes or an hour it takes a photo for the video. So you could take days and days of this footage as long as you have enough battery life, and it would take a photo every minute. And then it'll put them all together when you're done recording. We also have night lapse, which is the same thing as time lapse, but just with different exposure settings so it works better in low light. And that's pretty much it for the basics of recording in fast motion. So now I'm going to talk about photo mode. So either tap the mode button or swipe on the screen, and now you're in photo mode. So first we have normal photo, so it's just a singular photo taker. I'll talk about it in a bit. Next we have live burst, which is like a live photo on a phone. So it's like a animated photo type of thing. It's not a video, but it takes a bunch of frames. Below that in the menu is just burst, which has a lot more settings. You can change the burst rate or amount of frames that it takes. I usually use burst, and I don't see why anybody would use live burst when you have more flexibility with burst. After that is night photo, which is down here. And first I'm going to walk you through most of these settings. So for normal photo mode, we've got all the similar settings that we had when I showed you about everything else. The only differing setting is output. It tells you the quality of your photo. And this isn't exactly a quality by resolution, I mainly mean how good the colors are. So I usually keep mine on Super Photo since it has the best color quality, but if you wanted to have RAW for processing your photo afterward, you could do that. It comes with Super Photo, HDR, JPEG, and RAW. I suggest keeping this on Super Photo for beginners. A quick tip for taking group photos is that you can set a timer here, and you can make it 3 seconds, 10 seconds, so that you have enough time to run back to the group or whatever you're doing. So next we have live burst, but there aren't any settings for live burst really, pretty much. There's just scheduled capture timer, and you can't really change anything. But in burst, we actually have a lot more settings we could change, mainly the burst rate, which is helpful because we can change how long it takes the photo and how many seconds. So right now it's auto, so it automatically decides, but if we do, for example, just a random one here, 10/3, so this tells your GoPro to capture 10 photos in a 3-second burst. So it just takes all those photos, and that's mainly it for the burst basics. And next we have night photo. GoPros are typically not the best at taking night photos and videos, but if you really want to have a good night photo, I suggest taking your settings and making them the best for your current scene, and then making sure your GoPro is completely still. You can swipe down and you can enable different things. So the first thing is voice control, which is that little person talking with the X. So when you turn this on, you're now able to say things like, GoPro, start recording. And now our GoPro's recording, and now we can say, GoPro, stop recording. And it stops recording, and now if we swipe up from the bottom, we can view our videos. So now you can hear me talking. And that was me talking about the GoPro stop recording. So swipe back down from here, and okay, so the next one is the beep. So your GoPro probably beeps when you press lots of things, and I actually turn mine off because a lot of times I'm indoors and I don't really need that. So right now it's on, so you can hear that little beep. So if we press anything else, like maybe start a new video, for example, with the shutter button, see it beeps. So I just turn that off. Here we have QuikCapture, which is a really nice feature. So what it does is, whoops, I don't know why that started recording. Okay, QuikCapture. So what it does is when the camera is completely off, you can tap the shutter button and it just starts recording immediately. Like it turns on and just starts recording. And then when you press the shutter button to stop the recording, it automatically stops and then turns off again. So that's a great feature. I'm going to leave that on. Feature that I really find useful is the next icon here, which is screen lock, because when you're underwater, the water droplets actually act as fingerprints and they will touch your screen. So when you're underwater, it's going to be touching it. So you can't really touch anything here unless you slide this lock and unlock the screen before you touch anything. So that's why it's good for underwater. So here we have this. So this is video performance modes, so maximum resolutions and frame rates for stunning image quality and ultra slow motion video, and you can move this down, so extended battery, and then if you want, and if you're using a tripod, then you can do tripod stationary video, so hyper smooth will be always off, and yeah, we've got the battery saver and everything. So I'm just gonna leave mine on high performance. And here, this is our back screen. So the back of our screen always says what we're doing. And if we are in video mode, let me just get out of this. If we're taking a video, you can actually see everything going on in there. But you can actually change what's on that screen by simply going down and clicking on this. And now we have a bunch of options. So we can actually completely turn this off if we wanted to save a lot of battery power. Right here, we can just display the status. So right here, we just have dashboard. And if we weren't in dashboard, so let me just do this. So if I just was in video mode, it wouldn't say anything. It wouldn't show the video. It just shows our status. Here we have actual screen, which shows you everything on your screen, but the bottom and stuff is cropped off, as you can see. And then we have the default, which is full screen. So that just expands the video to the full screen. I like to see this because I like to see everything on my screen. I just like to see all that stuff. So this is the rotation. So if you actually rotate your GoPro, so just let me rotate this, it changes the orientation. But what that does is it locks the orientation. Maybe you know the orientation you're gonna wanna have for the day and you just want to say like that, you could do this, and now it is locked, so you can't turn that. So now over here, we have connections and preferences. So I don't usually, as you can see at the top here, I don't use the GPS and I don't use the app connection because it drains a lot of battery, and the GoPro Hero 10 also drains a lot of battery, and the default battery it comes with is not the best, especially for the GoPro Hero 10. So I personally don't have these on, but in connections, you can change wireless connections to on. So maybe you wanted to upload all your new footage, you can connect another device, camera info, like maybe you want to connect a remote. You can change your Wi-Fi band. And then in preferences, here we have a lot of our settings. So in general, we have our beep volume, QuikCapture is on, we already went over that. It will automatically power off after 5 minutes of use, and the LEDs are all on. So the LEDs are the front one that's actually here, and then the back one, which is above the selfie camera right here, like directly above it, right there. So then we have video compression, the date, and the date format. So there you have your general preferences, and of course you could change your voice control language, and there's a bunch of other settings in here that are pretty self-explanatory. So that is the end of our GoPro tutorial for today. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe. That'll really help me continue making these videos. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments section below and I'll do my best to answer them. See you next time.